Thank all you guys for being on today. And I want to begin from last week. And what I mean by that is I want to look at, or to at least think about, what we talked about in relationship to Moses going to beginning. In actuality, I don't Moses returned to beginning as much as I believe that he pretty much lived there. And the reason I say that is because his life took a different turn after he spent time with Jethro, the priest. I believe that once he was taught by Jethro who he was created to be, and realized the journey that had been given to him, his whole life changed. And being committed to that journey, and, I believe that he pretty much lived at that place of beginning. And for those of you who are not aware of what I'm talking about or saying when I talk about beginning, I'm not talking about Moses going back to see everything that is created unfold. I'm talking about Moses going back to the primordial light, going to a place of meditation where he is allowed to see the light of everything that is. And it being in that place of meditation, not necessarily hearing anything, sometimes you do, but more times than not, you receive more and by an infusion of wisdom than you do when by hearing something. And most of the time, you do not realize what you have heard until. Hold on one second. I'm sorry, that's one of my grains. You don't really get to the place where you get to the place rather where you begin to understand that you have heard more with your soul than you would ever hear with your physical ears. So, or with your mind for that matter. So I would that we would explore that. However, I did see the text that Kathy sent, and it is along the lines of something that I wanted to talk about today anyway, and that is trying to understand where we are in terms of the facilitators, the teachers, as well as those of you who are on the line, because I've been shown something that I want to share with you, but I would love to see where we are in terms of revelation, the things that we've seen, not necessarily from what we heard last week or the week before, for that matter, but whether it is something that we've been shown 10 weeks ago or 10 minutes ago. I would appreciate it if you guys would begin sharing that with each other or with us, please.
Good morning, everyone. And Reb, I hope this answers your question. Since last week, two of the words that I've been concentrating on is indignant and indignation. And this may tie into Moses when Jesus stated that the hand that writeth the law has the best interpretation of the law, and I'm paraphrasing that. But just those two words of indignant and indignation, of just knowing how to control your anger. If you're annoyed by something, acknowledge it that it annoys you, but Don't let it blossom into being out of control. Um, and just this week to apply that, is everyone familiar with the word indignation?
I'm sure.
Okay, doke. Well, just this week, my supervisor called me up. And he said, George, we got a load that's uncovered. Could you help us out? And my response is, I got an appointment I got today. I will not be able to do it. I was annoyed by the phone call because at Pet Dairy, there have been drivers who have been suspended for being on the phone. There have been drivers who have been fired for being on the phone. And it's not so much about being on the phone, it's what they hear, what you say on camera. So I was just annoyed about it because you can't implement a law and then use that law to your benefit. We have technology in the office with Pet Dairy. They know I'm moving. Yet at this time, I was not moving. And I asked him, I'm like, how do you know if I'm not moving? He said, I didn't look at it. So just in indignation, and when I look at some of the things that Jesus dealt with in the New Testament, some of it was based on indignation, the stoning of the woman that was caught in an adultery. And allegedly, there's indignation in there because some parties were not present. Number one, her husband was not present, nor was the person that it was alleged she had an adulterous act with. And I'm looking at these things Jesus may have dealt with, who may have provoked anger in his own self. However, how do you deal with that when someone is trapping your intelligence by way of the teachers, not y'all teachers, but the teachers of that era, asking Jesus, what does thou say? And his response was, the finger that writes is the finger that has the best interpretation. However, by way of due process, and due process was in that if you just couldn't stone someone, there was a certain format that you had to follow. So that's what I've been dealing with, not dealing with all week, but I've been not even wrestling, just thinking about the word indignation and indignant, and how that word indignation, it may have a negative slant to it. Some people storm the Congress by way of indignation, unjust or unfair act. That's it, Brad.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Anyone else?
Pastor.
Mm-hmm.
Good morning. I wanted to go back to something that we talked about last week, looking at Aaron and Moses, and you and Ron and I were having a conversation about it. And I want to have a little more understanding and maybe shed a little more light on this topic. We were looking at what Moses' name means, and it was to draw out. And we were talking about how he was able to draw the people out of bondage. We looked at Aaron's name, which means light giver. And when you were saying that he knew, and that during this time he was never deceived, that he was just buying time, we talked about what that looked like, and that how we today have become a composite of both of those characters, in the sense of that energy to draw out and that energy to be the light giver is in us, and that we are still drawing those out of religion who are steeped in religion. Could you talk about that a little more this morning?
First of all, yeah, thanks. Moses, Aaron, when Moses was in the mountain, if you look at it, the story carefully, what you see is that when Moses came out of the mountain and began to confront the people about what had taken place, the ones who had worshipped the idol died in the wilderness. However, if you look even closer, what you see is that Aaron is the one who said to them, "Tomorrow we will have a festive day," and it was during that period that they worshiped the idol. Now, Aaron realized that Moses was supposed to return that next day. It is understood that Moses had told them meaning the Hebrews, that when he was going into the mountain, and he would be gone for 40 days. And they started counting the day at the day he left. However, the count was to start once he got in the mountains the next day and begun and started this conversation with the Creator. So they were of the opinion that Moses had died because he did not return on that day. There's several things that's in that. One is they were so caught up into what they wanted to do. The religion had such a hold on them until wait one more day to see if he was delayed for some other reason. There were obviously instigators in the midst of the people all the time who were waiting for an opportunity to take advantage of Moses' absence. And when that took place, and they fashioned the golden calf, Aaron, knowing that they were a day early, said, "Tomorrow we will have a festive day." And on that day, tomorrow, Moses appeared, and he appeared during the time that many of them were bowing or worshiping or submitting to this idol. And there were any number of those Hebrews who did not do that, and Aaron being one of them. And the reason that I hold to this belief is because it says that those who worship died. Aaron did not die. Now, Aaron being the giver of light and a light giver means that Aaron was one who was granted the understanding of wisdom. And if you follow Aaron from that point forward, you will also find out that it was from the loins of Aaron that the Levite priesthood was established. So the idea of being a light giver says that this is what he was destined to be from the beginning of his existence in this earth. Moses being one who drew from the Creator an understanding of what was expected of the Hebrews, not just in that wilderness, but expected when they entered a consciousness, a land of promise, a consciousness that the earth had not experienced before. Moses was to take the instructions, which was labeled the law, from the Creator and bring it to the Hebrews there in the wilderness, and was to teach them with the assistance of Aaron and others. However, because of the anxiousness, the anger, or the distrust that some of them had in Moses' return, that did not happen. So Moses' purpose was to draw out of them the desire to continue to do what they were engaged in Egypt, and that is, worshiping idols, or worshiping a God that does not exist, but only exists in your mind. Today we are engaged in the same thing. We are the bringers and the givers of light, in that we look at what's in the original text of the Scriptures, and are shown the wisdom that's on the pages as opposed to simple words that have been mistranslated. We see what's hidden inside the letters of each word. We see the light that's hidden in the numbers on the page as well. And in doing so, we bring that light to humanity. We bring that light to humanity, and in bringing that light to humanity, we also make every effort to draw out of this consciousness or out of mankind a desire to follow after gods that were created by men. And what I mean by that is this: the Bible is a God that was created by men. In that, the words on the page are not taken as they were written. They are manipulated for the benefit of those who are manipulating them. And they are always manipulated in such a manner that it gives all authority and power to those who are in leadership, as opposed to looking at them for what they were written to be, and that is to teach the people that those who are in leadership are no different than those who are the followers. The only thing that's different is that the leader is supposed to be the servant to those who are followers, by way of teaching them that they have the same power that the leadership does. They have the same opportunities. They are endowed with the same abilities as was the leadership. And the leadership is simply there to make them aware of that and to be an example of that to them. We also, we are supposed to be, in doing this, we are supposed to be not only drawing the misinterpretations of the scriptures out of them, but we are supposed to be letting them see that we are not giving them any light, that they are light, and the only thing they have to do is to embrace it. And in embracing it, they become the priests of their own house, meaning the not necessarily physical buildings where they live, but meaning that they are a guiding force. They are a light in the places where they are, whether they are teaching or whether they are simply being present. That light is being shown to those who are in their midst. Is that what you're talking about, Kathy?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any questions about this?
Pastor Ron. I agree with what you just said. I've also looked at the drawing out. How I see it personally, I guess, is the fact that my concentration is on drawing out what is in me, and that is what is the mirror for the rest of humanity. And here's what I mean. Since we've come to the understanding of returning to beginning, I have struggle is not a good word, because it's a good struggle. It's a finding. It's a discovery thing. But I've been trying to see and understand what that's supposed to look like. And in each instance, I go there, something comes up, or not come up, just through my meditations. I see and understand a little bit more, and then the times that that I don't see anything. I just see darkness, and I'm trying to get there as to what. But what I'm seeing is that's on me. It's an individual thing, that there's part of my humanity that still stands in the way of that. And it seems to work better for me, for example, if somebody comes up with an issue or problem that is not mine, I seem to be able to see enlightenment a little faster for that person. In most cases, it has been that way anyway. So when I talk about drawing out, I look at it from an individual thing that my desire is to get this right and to see this and understand it so it can be used in the earth. And part of the drawing out, as you look at with Moses, all of that 400 years in bondage played a pivotal role in that. And the suffering is a tool that's used to do that. And what we look at today, we look at all the things that have happened, especially in the last 5 years or so. If you have a desire to see the Creator and to understand who you are, the suffering doesn't necessarily have to come to you individually as a person, but you're able to take on the suffering of the entire earth. You're able to take on the suffering of the George Floyds and the people that are killed, the people in Africa that are suffering, the people who are dying, people are losing their houses. You're able to feel that and move with it. So the suffering becomes a tool to help you draw that out because of your desire to see and understand, so that you can help and make this consciousness that we're speaking of, the earth consciousness, to brighten it, to make it more enlightened, to help men to see that there are souls and not just humanity. So the drawing out is, to me, all, just adding to what you're saying, is pulling out my own humanity so that I can see from a soul perspective with a greater clarity. And I hope that all made sense.
It does. However, I want to add something to that, if I may. When you made the statement that you find it easier when you are with someone who has a problem that they present to you, and it's then that you more easily see the light. Well, that purpose of them crossing your path is not just for them. It's to draw out of you as well. So there isn't a time when we are not in a position to draw out of ourselves the portions of our humanity that stands in the way of us embracing our spirituality. We do that by by looking in the mirror and seeing what we need to deal with, as well as by being shown through others what we need to deal with. They become a mirror as well. Does that make sense to you, sir?
Yes, it does.
Anyone else? This does not have to be related to what we spoke about last week in relationship to Moses. I'm interested also in finding out what you've seen personally during your periods of meditation.
Good morning. This is Barbara. Through a lot of what we've been discussing, the thing that I've been thinking about is the fact that one thing is not bad and one thing is good, in a sense. It's the way that we deal with it, the way that we have to balance it, the way that we have to harmonize it, so that when we call something bad, it's not necessarily bad. I'm reminded of the verse that talks about what was done for our, what was done to us for bad was for our good. So the thing I've been thinking about is to get beyond duality to unicity. We've got to be able to see that we need both, and that the harmony and the balance of that, of both, of whatever that both is, whatever the opposites are, because that's what duality is. This or that, this or that. Why not this and that? In order to get to unicity, we have to have this and that, regardless of as you all have been talking about what's been pulled out of us. Well, the thing that's been pulled out of me is that, drawn out of me is that everything is not black or white. Everything is not good or bad. There are nuggets, as you said. Aaron means light giver. There is light in it all, and the unicity, being one with Abun, is being able to draw out that light, whether it's a circumstance or whether it's an issue, but to be able to draw out that light that's in it. And the light has to be in it because the Creator created everything. So that's what's been, I guess, the thing that I've been thinking about a lot of.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else?
I like that. I like that. It shows that Aaron and Moses were one, not one the other. It shows the oneness in them, and the drawing out is what makes you see the light. So to be able to see them, or better yet, to see both of them in you, being a part of you, your spiritual journey, to embrace both of those things are what's needed to bring you balance. Yeah, I like the way you put that. That makes sense.
Good morning. This is Audrey. And to follow up on what Barb and Ron are saying, I think in terms of that thing about what they mean for our bad, the Creator means for our good, is because yes, there is light. There's always an opportunity to go back to the beginning if you can see it. As Amanda Gorman would say, if you could see it and if you could be it. But all those instances, all our life of the duality playing out is an opportunity for us to find the balance and to get back to the beginning. If we can only see it and be it. So that's kind of the thing I've been thinking about when we talked about Nicodemus and did he really get what he needed? And I think he did. He was given an opportunity to get back to beginning, but it was still up to him to take advantage of it. So I think there are always opportunities, and our journeys through life, our journey is always giving us an opportunity. We may see it as bad and good. We may see it as black and white. We may see it as however, but the Creator just creates opportunities for us to find the balance to get back to beginning.
Thank you.
Audrey just reminded me of something else too. If you look at Moses and Aaron and how they worked together, Moses was seen as the judge. He gave the laws. He told people what to do, etc. And Aaron was seen as the peacekeeper in a sense. And so, too much of either. Is like the tree of life, mercy and judgment. Too much of either is not necessarily the best thing, but to balance them all out, to balance judgment with peacekeeping is the central core of the tree of life, and that's the unicity. Uniting those two things is unicity.
I when you said that, Barbara, what I saw is the balance in that a teacher must have, and that balance has to be one of mercy and judgment, making the right judgment as to how to approach someone when questions are raised or when challenge is presented. How to be expressive of mercy as opposed to judgment, and allow some things to go. In other words, what we call it is picking your battles, knowing when to say and what to say, and to whom to say it, based upon the energy that you are experiencing at that moment. The other thing that came to me is this. Nicodemus also is, to me anyway, I see Nicodemus as representative of that intellectual religious person who feels like they know everything. That religious person who's versed in quoting scriptures but not understanding them. That moderator, that bishop, that lead preacher, that the one who is considered the preacher of preachers, very intellectual, but not very well versed in what spirituality is. That's how I see Nicodemus. Keep in mind that Nicodemus was no slouch when it came to the scriptures, but also Nicodemus, according to Josephus, is the one rather who designed the aqueducts for Jerusalem, so that the people in Jerusalem could have a flow of water, not just in the city itself, but also through their homes. So Nicodemus was an engineer as well, and that just strikes me as it reminds me rather of how people who are very intellectual can walk into a church and hear absolutely nothing and embrace it. So these, and if you take him and compare him to Aaron and Moses, seeing them as being one person, we will, I think, be able to see the line of demarcation that separates our religion from spirituality, regardless of what we call intellect. Any questions about that, or does that make sense to you guys?
But still, there's always opportunity to find the balance. Yes?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. Always. Always opportunity to find the balance, yes.
Reb, quick question for you, and anyone can answer the question. On last week, Monique and I went down to Greenville downtown, and that has been our regiment for like the last 3 weeks. And I really enjoy myself downtown Greenville. You get to see some studio musicians, and you see some other things too. And last Saturday, I saw a person who was asking for money. I would assume that they were homeless. And I gave them $5. And Monique and I went to the restaurant to eat. And I was kind of disappointed in myself because I just gave $5. And trying to bring balance to that, I was disappointed in myself because that scenery, $5 can't get you nothing. I'm not saying $5 did not aid, yet just in that scenery, I don't know too many things $5 can get you or get that person. I was just disappointed in myself because I had more than $5 on me. I think $20 would have been better. Yet as it relates to balance, Reverend Rich, I got upset with myself or not upset, disappointed in myself. I didn't view him as the lead. I just gave him the lead. So as it relates to balance, was I incorrect or incorrect? I can't tell you where my heart was. I just saw the man asking for money.
Okay. First of all, he may have had 15 more, and the reason you gave him 5 is to make 20. I don't really get caught up in the amount as much as I do whether I feel that it should be done, because there are times when there are people who are asking for money, I will not give it because I don't feel it. And if I give it when I don't feel it, the question becomes, why am I doing it? Am I doing it because it's the right thing to do, or am I doing it for myself? And if I'm doing it to make me feel better, then I am giving it for the wrong reason. The other thing that I want us to always remember, and I'm not speaking to the experience that George had, because that was a direct occasion with someone seeking money. There are times when people come into our lives, and the last thing that they need that they want from us is money. For example, there are times when there are people who don't have any money. All they need is somebody to listen to them. There are times when people simply need someone to embrace them or smile. I remember complimenting someone, and the lady says to me, even I run a drugstore, and I complimented this lady, and the lady said to me, you don't know what that has done for me. I wish that the one I have at home would do that. And see, it was different. And the difference was that this lady received more than I could have ever given her with money without me knowing it. So my point is this. Money does not always serve the purpose, but there are times when it does. I'm sure that every one of us on this phone has been in a circumstance or in a space where we simply wanted to hear someone say it's going to be okay. The last couple of weeks, there have been things that happened that has really torn my heart to pieces, and honestly, I still don't know where to put them. Well, last week, I was told about someone whose home had been broken into, and they tortured this young man and raped him with a broomstick, and he's currently in the hospital. And I'm not going, the circumstances surrounding it doesn't matter. What matters is that someone was brutal enough to do this to the child. And then day before yesterday, I'm told that this man breaks into this house and actually stomps this woman to death in front of her mom, who is sick, and she was taking care of her. What do you put those things in the space of what we are dealing with? When we think about those brutal acts, they take a hold on our hearts. They tug at our hearts more so than it would if someone has been killed simply by a gunshot. Both of them are death, but the two that were brought to me by way of informing me of what happened, those were much, much more painful. And I find myself pushing the idea of pain away from me because of how I feel, and I think about what they had to endure. and hoping that they lost a sense of feeling before it got to a state of untold agony and pain. I don't know where to put things like that. And this is certainly a part of the ugly truth about this journey that we're on, and how it speaks to how imperative it is for us to not only stay the course, but also I think it speaks to us about the realness of the need for humanity to come to a sense of who it is in order to, at some point, bring an end to such agonies as these. So it has been and still is a burden to bear, but it's not one that I shy away from, because if I were not supposed to deal with it, it would not have been brought my way. So anyway, I wanted to share that with you and say to you that in a moment I want to talk about some of the things that I see us having to deal with in a way that we probably haven't even thought of. Any other questions or comments?
Pastor,
Yes.
this is Barbara. As you talked, what I saw was gross animalistic bestiality, which is where we are apart from the light of the divine that we are. It's almost the total opposite of the nature that we have. And so, as you said, perhaps it was there to remind us that we've got to stay the course. That the course of mankind depends on our staying the course. We cannot revert to that. We just cannot revert to that.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, it's Ron, Pastor. You relayed that story to me last night. You and I talked last night before I went to bed, and that really bothered me, especially about the woman and in front of her mom. And I both of them are terrible and brutal crimes, but that one touched me more, I think. So much so that I woke up with it on my mind, which told me I had been thinking about it most of the night. And I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go to the restroom, and as soon as I wake up, I see that. I see it in my head. And the first thing I did is, that's like, okay, Lord, why was it necessary for him to tell me that? Why was it necessary for him to know? And so that's the part that I'm looking at, is kind of what Barbara is saying, is if we don't do something with it as far as meditation, and I don't know the whole answer, then it's all for naught, and it's just a terrible crime that will probably continue in the earth. But my thing, I guess, that I look at is, do not think that because you've been shown a little bit of enlightenment that this is far distance from you. This is still a part of humanity. And as long as one man still thinks and does these things, so do they all. So you are the one who's moving in the opposite direction. You are the one to bring light to this, and you are the one to do not forget that loving kindness brings the balance to it. And that's kind of what I've been trying to look at with that. because it's not. I'm like, okay, what else is we're supposed to do? If we can't change this, if we can't move this to a better place, and I'm not necessarily picking my words. I don't have the words. This is something that, if you're not careful, can, kind of overwhelm you a little bit. But I with Bobby, we got to stay the course and stick to who you are, and realize that if nobody else in the earth can do anything with this, you can lock them up all you want to, but the attitudes and the energy doesn't change by just merely locking them up. That's all.
Thank you, Ron. Honestly, I asked the same question. What good does this serve? And I don't have an answer other than that it reminds us of the necessity of what we do. So, are there any other comments or anyone else to share what that they have been shown?
Pastor, this is Linda. I have a question. How do we see ourselves today as Nicodemus? What is it that an example? How would an example be of us in Nicodemus as today?
I see that in all of us, as a matter of fact, that we were in religious settings and we thought that we were on the right path and were teaching people what we had learned and what we were being taught. And then one day, our questions were no longer being answered sufficiently. And the more we raised questions, the more we were shunned. And at that point, we began to search for the truth, as Nicodemus began to search for an understanding of the truth that Jesus was teaching. And once we were shown the nature of truth, we had a choice to make. We could remain in the council of the Sanhedrin in those religious settings, or we could begin a movement towards light itself. And in our particular case, our journey towards light did not move us away from religious settings in the beginning. It actually brought us closer to those settings, in that our desire was to teach everyone what we saw. And as a result of that, we, being the Nicodemus who received what we were looking for, were pushed away from that council, were pushed out of those settings, because those who were in charge had no desire for anything to change, regardless of whether or not the wrong things were being taught. And I know that to be a fact, because I was told by more than one pastor, by more than one in leadership. I was told by the primary one in leadership that I know you're telling the truth, but I can't tell my people I've been wrong all these years. So it was my popularity, my influence over these people is more important than the truth itself. So it is in that regard that I see us as Nicodemus. Does that help you, Linda?
Yes, it opens up a lot. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else, or any questions or comments about that?
Pastor, I have a supposition I'd like to bring about, and since we're talking about this, the examples you gave with the 2 phone calls you got, we were talking last week about the suffering that Jesus went through, and what if that was sort of a picture, if you will, to show us how to the path to violence. I mean, the path through violence is what brings about balance. That big of an extreme, and I'm just saying that because the examples you gave come from that side. It come from that extreme. And what if, here's my supposition, what if because there are people in the earth now who have sought to understand what it means to return to beginning, that we have ones that are open the portal to understanding and to seeing personally what that type of brutality is and how to bring balance to it. And I put it out as a supposition because I have no answer really, but I look at the fact Barbara in one of her examples earlier was talking about the finding balance between mercy and judgment. This just kind of presents itself and recognizing that it's no coincidence. How do you bring, what is the judgment that we, and it's just a thought, okay? It's not something we need to, I guess, unless somebody has an answer or come up with an answer today. But how do you show not only mercy to the victims, but to the ones who inflicted these crimes and show mercy and judgment on this? I don't think it's a coincidence that we're seeing this. And I guess that's enough, because I don't want to babble on and on, but does this make sense? I think there's a reason we're seeing it. And the violence that's going on, this is all a part of it. And we hurt from it for a reason. So does that help see it in a different light or put it in a different place?
Before I address that, is there anyone who would like to speak to that?
This is Barbara. The people who did that, who were so cruel, are us. We are they and they are us. We've talked about being that, we're not islands. We are all connected. And we've talked about having compassion for the attitude of a Donald Trump, who cares absolutely, seemingly nothing about his fellow man. We've got to have that same compassion, not only for the victim, but for the individuals who committed those atrocities of stomping on the woman and killing her in front of her mother. We've had examples of Nazis killing people, of slave masters killing people, of slave traders throwing people over the boats. So the issue of the atrocity is not new. The issue for us that we have to adhere to is that in the midst of the atrocities, we have to draw out that light that is in that bestial act, that's in that bestial person, the animalistic person. And remember that we are they and they are us. And again, these are not two extremes. They're not a man who kills a woman, a victim who has no power. we are they and they are us. That's all I can say. We have to see the duality and get beyond the duality to understand what is the thing that unites us all, in spite of the way that we relate to each other in a dastardly way. What is it that unites us? And that is the divinity that some of us have not been able to pull the veil from our eyes in order to see it yet, or looking inward inside ourselves to see it yet. But it's there. And so I guess that's what I'm saying, that we've got to remind people, we've got to remind ourselves that even in spite of what we saw, it's there.
You're right, Barbara, and that's what I meant when I said I'm still looking at beginning and trying to get more clarity on it, because it's there. You sense that it's there. We see that it's there. We just hadn't pulled it all together yet, and that's what I mean. There's a reason that we're here. There's a reason that Pastor saw those things. There's a reason that he had to share them today, and the vision is for us. You know, it's presenting itself to us, and I think we're at a point where we can and will be able to see it.
I don't think that. I think we already see it, Ron. We just don't know what to do with it. And it may be that we're doing nothing with it other than to embrace to a greater degree that even the perpetrators are us. And the reason they do what they do is because they don't know who they are. There is no way that any of those who committed those atrocities could possibly know who they are and do what they did. And I know that it seems to be a daunting task or an impossible journey when we talk about changing the hearts of humanity. It's only daunting when we look at it with the number of individual people. It's daunting when we think about it from an intellectual/religious point of view. However, when we embrace the reality that we are spirit, and the spirit is just like the wind. No one knows where it comes from. No one knows where it goes. Not only that, but the wind goes where it chooses, and it appears where it's needed. So when we look at it from that perspective, it makes a difference. Evelyn raised a question to me during the course of the week. She says to me, why is it that we can feel the wind, but we cannot touch the wind? And my response was, because you are the wind. And it is not you who feels the wind. It is the house that you live in that experiences the touch of the wind. It is my belief that a gentle breeze is gentle and relaxing because it reminds us of who we are. It is familiar to who we are. It is familiar to us. So what I'm saying in essence is, if we can change the rage in a hurricane or a tornado, we should not feel incapable of changing the rage in the consciousness of humanity. We have the antidote to unripeness, and that antidote to unripeness is ripeness itself. And we know how to make the unripened ripe, and that is by a consistent infusion of truth into the consciousness of humanity. And that infusion of truth into the consciousness of humanity consists of being truthful with ourselves, truthful in our experiences, whether they be bad, good, or indifferent, however we interpret them. Be honest about what we are experiencing. That infusion includes the compassion that we have for those who we don't know, the compassion, the pain that's felt when is related to you about an incident as brutal as the ones we talked about. The young lady who was stomped to death, I know her, and I know her relatives of my mom. I know them. The young man who was raped with a broomstick, I don't know him. However, the compassion is the same. The pain is the same. And I do believe that the purpose of that compassion and that pain is to move us to a greater place of strength and determination. Those who are able to look at incidents like that as simply something else in the world that needs to be altered, as opposed to feeling the compassion for the one who did it, as well as the one who was the victim. Those who are unable to feel that type of compassion are looking for change in the wrong places. I was in conversation with someone during the course of the week, and her search for change was putting prayer back in schools and children going to church. And one of my responses to her was, church really didn't change us. It gave us a sense of stability, but it didn't stop you from doing what you wanted to do. There has to be something greater than that. And when her response was, in essence, put him in jail. Jail doesn't change that. And I said to her, they need to be freed from who they think they are, because they don't even like themselves. They don't expect to live to see 30. They need to be taught about who they are, and she could not even understand what I was saying. But the point of the matter is this. Every single time we have these discussions, we are putting in the macro, we are infusing in the consciousness of this earth what light and truth looks like. We are bringing a sense of balance to everything that is. There are people, for example, who are in an uproar about these voting bills that are being passed in state legislative bodies. They don't faze me. they on the news, they don't faze me. And the reason they don't is because I am very much aware that it is always the darkest before the dawn. And in this particular case about these bills that are being passed, if they are not as brutal and as racist as they are, then nothing happens to change it. Racism stays as subtle, stays as it is, intact as it is, and in some cases it is subtle. But when you force the hand by going to the extreme, once the change is put in place, it is there, and you don't have to revisit it again. Example of that is this. The section in the Constitution that deals with voting rights says that the states has the right to choose the place, the time, and the method of voting with the caveat. That caveat is this: unless the U.S. Congress passes a bill that gives them the authority to set the parameters for voting. And of course, I'm paraphrasing. And this is the first time in the history of this country that Congress has made a decision or is in the process of making a decision whether or not it's going to do that. Why am I telling you this? Because from the inception of this nation, all of these things have been left in the hands of the states. And by virtue of having done that, the slave states have always been the most powerful states in the nation. It is no coincidence that what are called red states are slave mentality states. And it is no coincidence that these are the states with the greatest level of ignorance when it comes to understanding the politics of their lives and the way people are manipulating them. These are the states where you have the least vaccinated people and the sickest people and the poorest people. It is no different than the Catholic Church. You show me a Catholic nation in a place of color, and I will show you poverty. You show me a red state, and I will show you poverty, especially among Caucasians who support red state. You show me a Christian state in the Bible Belt, I will show you poverty in that state. What am I saying to you? I am saying to you that there is no difference between Catholicism, Christianity, racism, Republicanism, or anything ism you want to name. All of those are the same energy. And it is incumbent upon us not only to recognize it, but not to fret when it appears as though it is going to be dominant in its desires. It cannot be and will not be, because our journey is to be the dominators of earth consciousness for the benefit of humanity. And dominating earth consciousness for the benefit of humanity is saying that we are not only the light source, but the light that will continue to shine in the midst of this confusion that seems to prevail in this nation, in this world. We must change this. And we can and will do it. Are there any questions about this before I say something else? Any comments?
Ms. Barbara, I think the balance we're bringing to all of this is being able to recognize the pain felt not only by people who are in the midst of it, but there has to be some degree of pain for those who are ignorant of who they are, that something in them is so lacking that they lash out, and that's painful also. And so the balance is that I don't know if there's anyone else who are seeing that there is pain in the midst of both the victim and adversary, whatever the situation is, and that's the balance. And so, even though this is so egregious, that by our putting it in the macro, as you said, how many deaths have been averted because of it being in the macro, and acknowledging that we're all one. We don't know, but it has occurred.
Yes. Anyone else?
Pastor, I would just add to what Barbara just said and add to it that in recognizing the pain too, when you spoke of compassion, that we have to still, because we recognize that we are the same entity, we are one. The perpetrator is a part of who we are too. But I would take it a step further as well and say, when we recognize we are one, when we recognize we have compassion, I guess what I see is the next step in the journey, and it's not a process of step one, step two. I don't mean it in that manner, but I mean an awakening and a recognition of the fact that the next part of that is forgiveness, because we talk of compassion, but we have to recognize too the power of forgiveness in all of this. When we talk about things really changing, if I can go inside myself and really come to a place where I am at balance and at peace and can forgive and still love you in spite of what you may have done, because the pain in that person is what's resonating in them, and that's what they're most aware of. But when they see someone reaching out with love, compassion, and kindness and forgiveness toward them, I feel that stirs the awakening on the inside of them to becoming aware of who they are and the power that's in them to change all of those things, those demons that are driving them, and I use that word demons loosely, that are driving them to commit the acts that they're committing, or to have that hatred and the bestiality and all of those, that base nature in him. That to me is the key to changing, is the power of forgiveness. That's all.
I think one of the principle that you have related in what you were saying is the principle of love covering a multitude of sin, meaning that love covers a multitude of entanglements, and keeping that at the forefront does indeed give us a sense, or at least it should anyway, a desire rather, to be sure that we are focused on forgiveness and not revenge. And the reason I find it with people to be so difficult to do that is because we have been taught that vengeance is ours, but we've been taught that in a surreptitious way. We always want something to happen to the person who did that will suffice as punishment to them, as opposed to having a greater desire for them to, for their hearts to change, and they recognize what they have done and seek to be reconciled with humanity itself and with its creator. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Anyone else?
This is Janice. I feel like I've been spoiled a little bit this morning, because each time I've thought to say something, one of the other teachers expressed that thought. So I've been able to sit quietly. But I will share something that has been rattling around in my mind. I thought about the pain that the perpetrators must have felt, or even the disconnection that could allow them to commit those atrocities. And I was reminded of the saying that the wound is where the light enters you, which I believe is Rumi. And it's such a beautiful phrase. And I'd never thought about it in connection with something so violent and brutal. But I think there's a connection there and an opportunity, not only for forgiveness, but for redemption as well, and for an incredibly powerful transformation. And that's definitely my desire for this circumstance.
I didn't really have an answer to your question when you first asked, when we first started. But then throughout the conversation, I realized that there was something that had been taking place, but I did not necessarily grasp it with my mind. But I did take note that it was actually taking place a lot within the past week. And for quite some time now, I don't want to call it a prayer, I'll call it meditation. I forget what the word is called when someone has like a small like mantra or something that they say to themselves. I forget the exact name for that. But say it again. But for a very long time, there has been two that I would always say, and that is that I live in a generous, safe, kind, unbelievable, beautiful, loving universe. And then the second being that, in no particular order, I help many people, past, present, future, to know who they are and to grow deeper into themselves. And what we were talking about today, even with the perpetrator involved in those situations, those situations that you shared this morning. In both of them, it is what we're talking about. Those individuals who did those acts did not know who they were, or had, at the very least, a very small glimpse of who they were, and for the greater part, do not know who they are or who they were in those particular situations. And the reason that came up for me this week is because several people have reached out to me and expressed in ways that I had taken for granted, in hindsight, in the impact that I had in their life in terms of their own personal growth and where they are right now, and just being extremely thankful. And so with all of that said, I do believe that it is important when we talk about that particular balance, that within our hearts and our desires, that no matter what we encounter, that we don't fail to only want to demonize or in a certain way punish or banish or little the spirit of or anything that we can think of that would equate to making one less when they have done something, but actually wanting more for them in the same way that Jesus was expressing to Nicodemus in terms of being more and understanding his identity. And with holding that space and doing that, that we create, even unknowingly, just through our desire, the balance needed to create an opportunity for those individuals, and not even just individuals that we come in contact with on a personal level, but on a macro level, to then begin to know or have the opportunity to grow and to know who they are. And the reason why I say past, present, and the future is because I take the element of time completely out of it. I'm done. I'm finished.
Okay, thank you, sir. Anyone else?
Yeah, I like.
Go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, I just like to add something. At one point, it was extremely hard for me to read the scriptures and whether or not I was looking at one of the patriarchs or one of the prophets, or especially what Jesus did, and see myself in that. To be able to see that I can be these things too. And this is not above me, and stop saying this is too big for me, or who am I to think that I can change the world or do any of these things. That's on the one side. You look at that and you come to the realization that these are all things that are written about you. These are things that you not only can do, but have already done. And get back to that in a second. The other side of that is to look at the ugliness of it and say, how can I beat a man without beyond recognition and nail him to a cross? Or how can I shoot a man or put my knee on a man's neck until he stops breathing? How can I stomp a woman to death in front of her mother? That's the other extreme of that. But when you are able to see the light side, that the holy things, the spiritual things, the soulful things that are being shown about myself, you also have to look at the fact that you are humanity that have put yourself at the beginning. You are the person who has understood what it means to be the Son of Man. And so you are every extreme. You are all. You are everything. You are the universe. And as Sheldon just said, you put yourself where you are beyond the scope of time. I'm trying to remember what Janice said when she talked about the light being in the womb. I thought that was beautifully said, and that kind of helps me a little in this conversation and put things in perspective and just remembering that, because a lot of times when things happen, your mind tries to separate it. For example, you want to say, I may not want vengeance for that man, but I cannot even begin to understand or put myself in his place, stomping somebody to death. That's not it. It's not putting yourself in his place. It's understanding that that type of violence is still a part of humanity. That type of confusion and not understanding who you are, that is the action that comes from that chaos that is in you turns to rage. So you are the one who brings enlightenment. You are the one that adds breath to that. You are the one that brings a calmness and puts things back in rhythm because of what you see and who we are. And just listening to the conversations and talk about those extremes, as Pastor talked about the wind, that's what we're talking about today. We become the breath of everything. and that breath has no boundaries. That wind has no boundaries. It does not say, I can't go to the Catholics. I cannot go to the Protestants. I cannot go to the blacks, to the whites, because as we are seeing and we're looking at this, this is this type of violence and brutality has no boundaries. So neither do we. Neither do we. And to understand that and to further gain who we are and what these capabilities are. That's why I guess I love this group and the energy that comes from it and these discussions that we gain. And that is why it is also extremely important. I love this, that everybody gives their input and because every little bit counts. Every little bit brings about a little more clarity and helps us to see not only where we are, but where we're headed. So thanks. I just wanted to add that.
Thank you, sir. Based on what you guys have said, Janice was talking about, I think she attributed to Rumi that the womb is the first place where you receive the light. I take that also, as is being said, that in the place of your greatest darkness, there is the opportunity for you to see the light. And that is true also when we talk about what has transpired with these people who have done what they have committed these atrocities. They still have the opportunity to see the light. However, I do believe that we are in a greater position to give them an assistance in being able to receive that light. How so? If we truly can see ourselves as being no different than the wind, than the air itself, then what we actually are saying is that when they inhale, when they breathe, they are being transformed by the energy that we are. The transformation of us spiritually becomes the opportunity for transformation for everything that breathes in the earth, for everything that lives in the earth. And we have opportunity to take full advantage of that by embracing that reality, that knowing that there is no difference in the wind, the breath, or spirit. We are all of that. And I think this discussion, these opportunities of forgiveness, are giving us a sense of how we are to desire for humanity to be changed, and that is simply again repeating that when they breathe, they are breathing the energy of our words, the energy of truth, the energy of life, which in essence opens them to see who they are and creates a greater desire to be something other than what they have presented themselves to be. Questions or comments? Okay, I want you. Let me share this with you. There is something I want to say. We are in a whirlwind of change right now, and things are about to really get ugly. This has nothing to do with what has been termed, I use this very loosely, pushback. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about resistance. The resistance to change, the resistance to a shift in power, in the power structure, is about to get really, really ugly. I'm not talking about getting ugly in regards to us in a financial way. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about ugly to what we are to experience in this society. The ugliness of it is going to be worse than anything that any of us have ever experienced. It doesn't mean that we should be afraid of it, shy away from it, or wish that it doesn't happen. Why? Because it must happen. Everything has to reach a crescendo before it changes. This is no different. Darkness is greater just before the membrane of light has been pierced. We have already pierced the membrane of light. Now it's time to push through. And pushing through this membrane that separates us from the light by way of our thoughts and by way of our having been taught the wrong things about the Scripture. We are at that junction now. And when the membrane of darkness is torn, it looks as though there is a flood of atrocities, but that's simply because the light is coming through like never before. And what has been taking place all along in the minds of men is being made known by the light that is flooding the consciousness of humanity. The strength, the power, not only to understand but to endure, has been granted us. There is a greater sense of who we are and a greater determination to stand boldly in the face of adversity. This has come because of an infusion of light that many of us were not aware of. On the 7th of this month, there was something, Evelyn made me aware of something, and it was that Sirius was giving off an infusion of energy into the earth. And that energy infusion into the earth, as always, was for the benefit of humanity. And the way humanity benefits from an infusion of that light is when those who are in search of light are infused by it. And that energy infusion speaks to a greater clarity in our thoughts, a reawakening of as to who we are, the positivity in our transforming from being simply men to understanding that we are spiritual beings. There is a greater shift in our consciousness, our awareness of what goes on around us, and it also, this energy also serves to unblock those things that have stood between us and the depth of love that is necessary for humanity to change. It is also a manifestation of the spiritual growth and awareness that we embrace in this earth realm. What happened is, on the 7th, what I did, I was going to send it to everyone, and I heard something say to me, you do it. And what I did, I focused, I meditated to receive it for the benefit of every one of you, so that the whole of humanity could benefit from it for all of us. I suppose what I'm trying to say to you is this. I went to this place of the mountain not to be there for me, but to be there for all of you and to receive on behalf of all of you, so we could be more effective in our service to humanity. Suppose for a moment that these things that are called vessels from outer space are vessels being guided by aliens. Suppose for a moment that these vessels are guided, brought into this atmosphere by those who look like us, who looks like the African. And the reason they are making themselves known to military installations is a warning. And the reason they're not landing and making themselves visible is because they would be obligated to free us from something that we need to free ourselves from, and that is bondage. You call it far-fetched, but listen at this. There is a tribe in Africa, and you've heard me say this before, called the Dogon. And the Dogon said that they were brought here from Sirius 2. And the astronomers were aware of Sirius 1. And they said that they were ignorant because there is no such thing as Sirius 2, a planet, Sirius 2. But the Dogon insisted on it. And recently, at the turn of the century, the astronomers found a planet behind Sirius 1, which is indeed Sirius 2. So how did they know that? Why did they say that's where they came from? How were they aware that there was a planet behind the planet that astronomers were not able to see with the best telescopes that has ever been made? They were not able to see it until they were able to get a telescope or decided to have one to focus on what was behind Sirius 1. Why is it that the Dogon were able to not only know this, be aware of this planet, but also to be able to map the universe itself? So I say all of this to say this. All of the things that we have been told is science fiction, all the things that we have been told as demonic, all the things that we have been told that are far-fetched and impossible, you have to ask yourself, who told you? Who told you that? The same ones who told you that are the ones who told you that you were inferior. The same ones who told you that are the ones who told you that you derived from an ape. The same ones who told you that are the ones who told you that God could not possibly love you because you are a descendant of Ham and your skin is darkened because you're cursed. These are the same ones who told you that. So why is it that we hold so fast to and so tightly to what we have been told by those who have been have said derogative things about us, and not research it or try to understand it on our own and hear what is being said by those who have no axe to grind in this matter? Keep in mind this, that Caucasians have never, ever thought that the African was inferior to him. The Caucasian used inferiority to enslave the African. The Caucasian has always known that the creativity and the life of Earth itself was in the soul of the African. They've always known that. Yet, because of greed and a desire for prosperity at any cost, they have chosen to use a lie of inferiority to dominate, manipulate, and to continuously enslave the mind of the African, thus enslaving the soul. So I am saying to you, when the ugliness raises its head, know this, that you are the light that was brought into this earth for such a time as this. Regardless of how dark it may appear, regardless of how it may seem to be impossible to change, know that you are the possibility for change. You are not just that, you are the change itself. You are the light that brings light to every place that is darkened. You are the light that changes the heart of humanity. You are the wisdom that brings understanding to a earth realm that has never known understanding before. You are the light that brings an awareness to earth consciousness, the rightness that is necessary so the earth can be what it was designed to be. As above, so is below. That concept is a concept that has never been fulfilled until now. We have the opportunity to make sure that as above, so is below, without any exceptions. So I say to you today, again, things are going to get ugly, but no matter how ugly they get, know that you are the beauty that make the ugly thing beautiful itself. Any questions or comments? It is my desire that you embrace what has been seen and said, and what I would love to happen is for us to get on this line, especially those who are facilitators, those who are teachers, and be expressive of what you have seen. Be in a continuous meditative state so that when this line is opened, that we are able to discuss, we're able to talk about what we have been shown. Janice made a statement. Everything that I was going to raise, our teacher addressed it. I do believe that we are being shown the same thing, but different aspects of it. So it is my desire that we remain at this place of beginning, and we begin to speak what we see, what we experience, what our hearts feel, so that we can be much, much, much more effective in bringing about the change in the earth consciousness that is necessary for the benefit of the whole of humanity. Any questions or comments about that, and do you agree with that?
Agreed.
Agree? Yes.
I agree.
Yes.
So
I
from this
agree.
day, thank you.
Agree.
Thank you. From this day forward, when this line is opened, it is open for us to speak what we see, especially those who teach. Ugliness is coming into your vision. You are going to see an ugliness that you've never seen before, especially you, but in general, everyone. The difference is this. You have an opportunity not only to see it, but to understand it and to read it as a sign of the time, so that humanity can benefit from it, no matter what it looks like, no matter how it makes you feel. With that, I'm done, unless there are questions or comments.
I just wanted to share a quick thought before we finish. The idea that pain is something that can reverberate. And when we have discussions like we did today, that pain is interrupted, and it allows us all to heal. So as the ugliness comes, and we interpret or reframe, however you want to phrase it, we're able to interrupt it and prevent it from sort of pinging around inside of our consciousness. That's all.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. You guys enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, you as well.
And we
Thank
will
you.
And we will see you tomorrow at 11 o'clock.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.